There he is.
I thought you guys forgot about me. I was about to.
Never.
Gene, how are you, guy?
Yeah, good. Good to see you.
Nice.
It's been a long time.
Nice
huh?
visit. Nice to see you, guy.
Yeah.
What's going on? What am I supposed to do here?
Well, I'm supposed to embarrass you as much as I can from all the old
Okay.
stories at Tanglewood, but
Uh-huh.
that was so long ago, he probably won't remember it, and it's going to be a big flop. But tell us something. I mean, you've had a tremendous career and a tremendous experience, and enlighten us. We're talking about enlightenment.
You're talking about music now, right?
Right.
What do you want to hear? What do you want to know, guys? I don't.
Well, how do you feel about music now? You've done a whole career. How do you feel about playing the tuba?
Well, if I played the tuba, I might feel something, but I don't.
Yeah.
As simple as that.
You listen to people. Yeah.
But music. I mean, when somebody spends so much time and energy trying to accomplish something, how does music ever leave them? I don't. That's
Right.
not possible. I miss the colleagues. I see them often. I go to the orchestra often. I still teach at Curtis for what it's worth now because everything's shut down.
Oh, that's a shame.
Everything like this on Zoom, which is hard to take.
Yeah.
But I just, what I spent all this time, the last year, I've learned Sibelius music writing. And so I've been doing arrangements for brass.
Wow. That's
I've
great.
got Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, Chopin, Debussy, Gershwin, McDowell, Shostakovich, all these guys for brass ensemble, small brass ensemble.
We need the McDowell and the, let's see, what else did you say? We've got the other one. Okay, great.
He's going to give you a list.
Edward McDowell, yeah. And how about Fuchs? The entry of the Gladiators March? I did that one too for brass sextet.
Nice.
That's the Circus March.
Well, let's start at the beginning. Where you're from and how you got started. Why did you ever start playing the tuba, and how did that all start?
Well, I'm originally from Philly. All of us kids, I have two brothers and a sister. One brother is still a professor of music at Temple. The youngest brother is still in the Air Force Band, about to retire in Washington. And my sister's a retired music teacher. We all studied on piano from an early age. Our father was a doctor, and he was a good pianist. He studied piano with a great teacher in Philadelphia till about the age of 50, and we all played piano. I continued studying piano until through my sophomore year in college. So piano is my first instrument, and I've got all this music in my head all the time. That's why I arrange all this brass sextet, quintet stuff. I always loved music. I always wanted to do something in music, but I was greatly discouraged by my family to doing anything like that. I understand my grandparents all came from Poland. They all came here as peasants, and they all settled in upstate in coal mines, Pennsylvania. They were coal miners, worked in a bar, was a cook. And it's a great American story. Actually, all their kids played musical instruments, and all the kids were successful. We all became musicians. My mother's brothers were engineers. One was an All-American football player, the All-American wrestler. And my father became a doctor, his sister became a nurse, and one brother became a priest, and they all played instruments. My father's brother, the priest, was a violinist. But the thing is, none of them had anything to do with music in Poland. So when they came over here, it was just something you did, but to major or to want to become a musician was crazy. You did that for fun. You didn't do that for a living. So I had to become sort of a renegade and sort of an FU guy at a young age to sort of do what I wanted. And but I went to Catholic University for 2 years as a liberal arts major in Washington. That's the best I could do at the time. But I became custodian of the music building, and so I was able to open and close it and practice when I wanted. And I also studied bass with the one of the bass players in the National Symphony. So I got a job also playing in a nightclub in a jazz trio Friday and Saturday nights in Washington. And since I had the key to the music building, I could bring the bass back at 2 o'clock in the morning because it wasn't my bass. Anyway, so how did I get into music though? That's probably how did I get to play the tuba? That's a fun question. Okay, so I went to a Jesuit prep school in Philadelphia, St. Joe's Prep. And as happens with the Jesuits, all those Jesuit teachers also have some sort of a job outside of just teaching their classes. And my German teacher, I had to take German. My German teacher, Father Piccolo, actually, he was a Polish priest. He had a deal that if you got below a certain quiz on a German test, you had to come up and polish polish instruments in the band room after school. Can you imagine somebody trying to get somebody else to do that today? Anyway, so I went up. I didn't do so good in the test, and so I had to come up to the band room and polish sousaphone. So while he's there, he knew I was a musician already, because one of the things I was able to do on Friday afternoons was, we had a good friend of the family who was a priest, a Monsignor actually, who would get me out of school early on Friday afternoons, and I would go down to hear the 2 o'clock concert of the Philadelphia Orchestra. This happened about once a month. It wasn't all the time. So he knew, so he was trying like hell to get me in the band. And you know, when you're a kid and it's a priest, you really can't say no to these guys. So I said, he said, we need trombone and we need tuba. And I says, why the hell would anybody want to play that thing? It's the tuba. So I went and I went on Saturday afternoon and I went to see this crusty old bastard who taught the trombone for the prep. And I lasted about 2 weeks. He was an ornery guy, I tell you. And so anyway, I took the trombone back to the priest and I said, listen, I gave it a try. I don't want to do this. He said, but Paul, you got to come in Thursday afternoon and meet the tuba teacher. He's a wonderful guy. Once again, I couldn't say no. So I went after school up to the band room, and he really was a very nice guy. And he put this giant thing over my head. And since I had sort of a embouchure already, you know, I've been playing the trombone for a long time, 2 weeks. I could get a sound out of this thing, and I thought, this is pretty cool. I like this sound. This is pretty neat. And of course, he was overjoyed that I could get a sound out of it all, and I could actually read notes. So that's how it all started. The tuba teacher actually was a postal carrier, but a very enthusiastic guy, and he was Italian, and he took me to Italian bands twice a week in Philadelphia, which was a great experience for me. So I played Tuesdays and Thursday nights with him in Italian bands. I did my first Mummers Parade in Philly when I was 15, and played in the comic division, a bunch of drunks going down Broad Street. If you know anything about the Mummers Parade in Philly, it's pretty fun. One thing led to another, and I went to Catholic U, and while there, I studied with the first trumpet in the National Symphony, and he said, you know, at the end of my second year, he said, you really should get a tuba teacher. So Bill Bell was kind of the most famous guy around at the time, and he had just left the Philharmonic to teach at Aspen. And so my parents permitted me to go to Aspen and study. And while I was there, Bill Bell got me a scholarship to IU, Indiana. And I finished up, got 2 degrees there, and was a teaching assistant to him. How far do you want me to go, guys?
Well, that's great. So, what did you do? Well, you want to talk about Tanglewood at all? Do you remember when we were there and Kazi was there, right? The trumpet player, right? Yes. So you, me, and him, somehow we were hanging out together all the time. Yeah. It seems like.
Yes.
What else? It was very funny. I think I was the only one that Kazi could understand. And it wasn't because my English was good, and sometimes we'd go to movies and we'd tell him, what was going on. And were you able to talk to him as well?
Oh my goodness, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, are you aware that Mike Roylance about 2 months ago had a gathering of all the tuba players ever been to Tanglewood?
Oh no.
He accessed the records going back as far as he could. He contacted more than 100 people, and on a FaceTime or a Zoom like this, about 50 people showed up. It was pretty incredible. It turned out I was there at 65, so I was the oldest one of them, and I think the Fromm Foundation fellowship started that year. Anyway. And as I was saying to the other guys who were online, I said, Tanglewood was a kind of a scary thing. It's the most pressure a young tubist kind of will go through. But it was special, really special. And when you saw all the people who'd been to Tanglewood, all the tuba players, just a lot of heavyweights went there. But Kaz and I became very good friends. I guess you don't remember this, Gene. Almost every night, his wife, who had sent him these ramen noodles.
Yeah, oh yeah.
We had ramen noodles and Ballantine scotch almost every night in his room.
I knew about the noodles.
Yeah.
I probably knew about the scotch in those days too. I forgot.
And, I saw Kaz every time he went to Tokyo, and I know you did a couple times with me. And I remember Chuck meeting you also with him. Yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, he fell off a cliff.
I heard that.
Fell off a cliff, wasn't found for 3 days after he was fishing, and it was never the same. The last time I saw him, he could barely walk, and he died a short time afterwards. That was last year in the orchestra, I think. Yeah.
So
that's not funny, but I loved your Jaguar at Tanglewood. Let me tell you, Gene, I'll never forget that.
My Jaguar, I know that we'd go over to New York State. We probably don't want to get into that. But,
yeah, the bars were open later there. Yeah.
So Seiji was there.
Yeah.
At Tanglewood, and also who's a contemporary music guy? What's his name?
Was that DeFallo? No,
a guy from Boston.
Oh shit!
The famous the ragtime guy.
Gunther Schuller was.
Gunther Schuller
that's
was
the guy. Yeah,
he was doing it, and I think you could play 5 against 3 or something really strange that he was into that. Everybody.
Well, the conductor Eleazar de Carvalho, he's the guy that did the beating.
That's right. And he's the guy that hired us all for the symphony in South America, De Carvalho.
De Carvalho, yeah. I remember your audition with Ozawa.
Yeah.
Well, tell us about that. So Gene's auditioning for Ozawa?
Yeah. Well, Ozawa was. This was the summer before Leinsdorf took over in the BSO, and Ozawa was there as just a guest conductor, but he was also the music director of the Toronto Symphony, and so he was looking for a first trombone, and so he was auditioning at the time, and Gene played for him. It was right in the what do you call where Tanglewood, the shed.
In the shed.
And I remember the audition. It was simple as that.
Yeah.
It was a solo audition, and that was it. Yeah.
Pretty much. I had to go to Toronto and audition again.
You did?
Everybody else.
I wasn't aware of that.
No, but those were the days. Huh?
I can't remember, Gene. Did you actually get the gig?
Yeah.
How long did you stay there before Canadian Brass happened?
About 4 years before, I guess. We started in 1970. So anyway, that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
You just start putting it together.
Yeah.
But yeah.
One of the things I do now is I got 5 grandchildren, and they're all close, and the oldest one, a 13-year-old daughter, sings in the Pennsylvania Girl Choir, old Pennsylvania Girl Choir, and of course they can't sing in person like nobody else can. It has to do with air, and so they have tried to Zoom sessions and stuff. But anyway, I ended up becoming the theory teacher to the girls. I spend a couple hours once a week doing that stuff with the kids. That's all fun, you know. Most of the stuff I'd started to forget.
Right. And that feels good, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
When did you go to the symphony, the Philly Orchestra? Was that
72.
72? And I think they'd had an intern that we know pretty well. Ellis Ween was there for a while.
No.
Is that right?
No.
He wasn't-
Ellis, let's see. There was no break between Torchinsky and myself.
Oh, okay.
Before Torchy were a couple of lesser names, and actually Jacobs played a short period of time, and he also did a tour with the orchestra while Torchy was trying to get out of his contract with NBC.
Amazing, huh?
So was the Philadelphia Brass Ensemble still going strong? Because they had that Christmas record that's still listened to regularly, and then the triple.
Yeah, you know, it's you should bring that up now. I run an organization called Philadelphia Orchestra Retirees and Friends, and one of the things we do, it's partly a social organization, partly we try to through dues and donations raise money to help the oldest retirees, and it just so happens that I've become now the the head of the royalties for the Philadelphia Brass Ensemble, because the only person alive since that time is Henry Smith, and he's sort of given over that to me. You know, they still get royalties for that Christmas record. It's incredible to me. It was done, what, 60, 67, whatever it was. It's incredible to me that they still pull in, what is like $3,000 a year for that album.
Wow.
That's amazing. There's a movie with Mark Ruffalo, about it's about about DuPont, the poisoning of DuPont. Remember the name of that? It was a fairly recent movie. Anyway,
Avengers.
What?
Avengers.
No,
I'm joking.
No. Anyway, I'm sitting in the theater listening to this movie, and about two-thirds through it, it's a Christmas scene, and I hear this, and I said, "That's Gil Johnson. This has to be the Philadelphia Brass Ensemble." I jumped out of my seat. And at the end, they got credits. So I know, guys know that coins are going to start trickling into the Philadelphia retirees.
Absolutely.
So I've heard Philadelphia play several times where recording is live. And a lot of people talk about how Philly is like the most European American orchestra, and they talk about the Philly sound and things like that. So, at least, from people that I've talked to.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay.
European.
Well, can you just talk about like the Philly sound, the famed Philly sound? Yeah.
Well, back in Ormandy's days, it was because it was so he was so heavy on the strings. Nobody ever could relax with him. He had his eyes on the last stand. Everybody, when we went like this all the time, you couldn't mess around with him. And as a matter of fact, sometimes he would actually double instruments. If he wanted a heavier line through the violas, he'd add another player to it. He'd have somebody from another part come over and play it. Philly still has a big tradition of strings, which is continued. It's not quite the same, and it's largely been continued because there's still a lot of great teachers that kept on that tradition at Curtis. That doesn't mean that every string player that gets hired is from Curtis, but there's a better probability that they will, simply because they have a different kind of sound, a different kind of weight to what they do. And in the case of someone like Hal Robinson, who teaches bass at Curtis, he's putting out some really great kids, and the last two openings at Philly were Curtis kids. So to answer your question, the Philly sound was largely based on the strings. But also, I mean, if you compare Philly Orchestra to Chicago, New York, Pittsburgh, the weight of the brass is different. You know, it's a much more much more balanced group. The woodwinds, brass, and strings than most orchestras. Does that mean it's European? I have no idea what you say that or why anybody says that, but that's European. It seems to me the whole world has become much more American over the years. You can't find a French oboe player anymore, or a Russian horn player that sounded like nanny goats all the time. You know, it's just everybody's evolved. And I think American brass players had a huge influence on what's happening in Europe.
Yeah, well, we like to think that Arnold Jacobs had this huge influence on the American sound that became kind of an international sound. However, you mentioned Bill Bell, and that certainly was the other school. I mean, the two schools became the Bell and the
Yeah.
And I think
Bell, it was inevitable that that Bell would have the kind of promise he did. It's New York, you know. New York is just it's not. Chicago cannot be New York. Boston cannot be New York. Nor can Philly. It's just New York is just playing where it was happening. You know?
Yeah. I think the Bell, the idea of the Bell sound, it was a more maybe more homogeneous, more in the texture, where Arnold was always projecting and being sure that you're up front on the sound. And,
Yeah, I would say it's probably true. Although, you know, I don't know that any of us really have an idea of what the most accurate idea of what Bell sounded like, because we don't really have enough recordings of those old days, just like there are not enough recordings of the Philly old days. What sticks out in some of the Chicago things is like, what a big impression upon me was that Hindemith, Concert Music for Strings and Brass with Hindemith conducting. You know, things like that had a big prominence on the net, more so than I think the stuff that was on there with the Philharmonic, the kind of literature that would really stick out with the tuba player.
Yeah. I had the opportunity when I was a child, I think I was in junior high, I got to hear Bill Bell. He was doing a workshop up in Minneapolis, and he was playing an E-flat sousaphone.
Yeah.
And it wrapped around, so it ended up under his arm. It was too big for it to actually lay down like it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Record this instrument and then play and sing.
Yeah. Matter of fact, he took me on some of those trips.
Oh, okay.
Where I would play with him. I didn't sing, but I would play with him because he wanted to support. You know, he didn't have the greatest chops at that time. You know.
He was an amazing singer. I mean, what a voice.
Yeah, you might not know this, that when he was in the Cincinnati Symphony, well, first of all, I should tell you, you know, Reiner was also a conductor at Curtis here.
Mm-hmm.
He took over, it was Stokowski, Rodzinski, then Blinarski, then Reiner came in for a few years because he couldn't get a job anywhere in America. And then he got Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. But when he was in Cincinnati, Bill Bell was the tuba player for part of the time. And just to sort of go off track a little bit, I'll come back in a second. But when the NBC was being formed, Toscanini didn't want to audition everybody, so he sent Artur Rodzinski around the country to bring in players. So when he was in Cincinnati, they were doing Meistersinger, and Rodzinski brought to the NBC, brought the piccolo player and Bill Bell. And it turned out the piccolo player, Benny Gaskins, was with Bill Bell in the Sousa band.
Oh, no.
Anyway,
That's amazing.
And so Reiner was in Cincinnati, yeah, and he was a complete bastard there also. I mean, Bill Bell would talk about having sessions with him, you know. I was going somewhere else with this. Where the hell was I?
Oh, that's pretty good, though. Let's hear about the bastard.
It's interesting that Reiner would play that role because, you know, here we are sort of comparing Bell and Jacobs in my mind.
Yeah.
And Reiner was a huge fan of Jacobs.
Uh-huh.
So That must be a choice too. I mean, if he knew Bell's playing and he knew Jacobs playing, that certainly would have been a choice.
I can't. I mean, my guess is Jacobs had lots of confidence, and that's all that would have been the most important thing to Ryder. If he felt he could get under your skin in the slightest way, you were dead. You were dead.
Yeah, well, Jacobs wrote about how he would play that. Jacobs was a kind of a pool player and a card shark, and he figured out how to not have to audition for Reiner constantly in front of the whole orchestra, getting called out. I read this passage. He said when a difficult tuba part was coming up, he'd make sure to warm up where Reiner could hear him playing. So he wouldn't have to check it out in public. That was very smart.
Do you have any favorite conductors, Paul, from your time?
Well, I had Ormandy the last 10 years of his life, and he was not the sharpest at that point. So it's not fair to say that he wasn't a great conductor. I just didn't see the greatness at the time. But it was a tremendous, just to off track a little bit, but it was a tremendous time for the Philadelphia Orchestra. I mean, we sold out every place. We were the most recorded orchestra there ever was. Platinum records. It was when you played on tour, and people went crazy. Then towards the end of his career, and after the end of his career, of course, the whole world changed. So the next conductor was Riccardo Muti, and Muti had a big influence in the orchestra. We became much more disciplined. Not that we weren't undisciplined before, but Muti required a certain rigidity, a pianissimo. And so Muti's years were very impressive, but he was also oppressive. He is not that way with Chicago anymore. Then came Savalas, and I would say that Savalas is as great as it gets. When you played with Savalas, you thought, well, this is the way it's supposed to be. And the rest of it is, they're all pretenders. Eschenbach has been a disappointment. Nobody wanted him. I'm really sorry that I never got a chance to play with Yannick Nézet-Séguin because he is really big time. He is really big time. Really special. Enjoy hearing the band with him.
It's cool that he's also conducting at Curtis as well. I feel like it's such a great, to see like sort of a youngish composer doing amazing things is so great for students.
Well, yeah, Curtis has a tradition of bringing in a lot of guests. They've had Savalas and Muti a number of times. They had guys like Rattle, Friedrich de Burgos, all kinds of every guest conductor that comes into Philly. They try to make it in the schedule. It's tough. These conductors come in with an awful lot to do in a short period of time. But yes, they get. Curtis is lucky. And matter of fact, Yannick, as of 3 years ago, started an internship for young conductors. So he spends a lot of time with those people, which is pretty special too.
Wow. That's great. Do you have any advice for young tuba players who are trying to make it right now? Because obviously the sort of climate for getting jobs has changed a lot since in the last 50 years. Do you have advice on teachers to seek out? Do you have advice on things to do as a young tuba player? No, nothing.
No. I'll say a few things. I think. First of all, I'm not the main tuba teacher at Curtis anymore. I gave that over to Craig. I don't play the instrument. I don't know the instruments. I don't know all the literature, and I'm really not so interested in learning all those things anymore. I conduct orchestral rep for brass and percussion at school when we have school. So Craig does that, and Craig is really good teacher. I mean, he's really good. My experience with Mike Roylance is he's really good. Aside from those two, I don't have enough experience with any of the rest of them. We know lots of great tuba players around. Teaching, I don't know, and I presume that these two schools, Curtis, and I presume that New England also is a very good place to get educated, and in all the things which will make you a musical player. What can you tell a kid today? I mean, you know, listen, I learned a long time ago, you can be honest with a kid. Tell him what you think. I'm not sure you got a career. And he just doesn't give a shit because he's going to do what he wants. You know, he's going to do it until it plays out on the negative side. And maybe that's okay. You know, just you need to give it your all, and you got to practice like crazy. You got to work so hard and listen and listen and listen.
Well, I think in that sense, that's the best advice already, which is you really aim for something, you put in that time and energy, you're structuring your own attitude towards life. You're structuring your time and your abilities, and that'll transfer to many, many things. This is something we've been talking about for months now, is that almost everybody we talk to never planned exactly how things turn out, or not even close to exactly. Your plans, you need to be open to opening the door on the side that you didn't expect to open. Suddenly you're doing something you would have never dreamed, but you're prepared because of that dedication and the time and effort that you put in. So,
that reminds me, you know, my son-in-law was a left-handed relief pitcher for the Montreal Expos. And unfortunately, his shoulder, which gave him issues, he had 2 operations on it, then he had to be scraped, and he had to stop. His career was stopped short. And so what's he going to do? Well, the fact is, he is such a disciplined person from what he had to do to learn his craft as a pitcher, that he's taken it other places. What he does now, he sells drugs. He sells medical equipment. He sells medical equipment. And he does really well at it because he knows the product, he studies it, he knows how to relate to people. And so he took that kind of discipline and work to someplace else where he can make a living, and everybody has to do that.
You know, we talked earlier about it seemed so innovative at the time, but in Hamilton, Ontario, they started the Mac Medical program would take in people that had not prepared to be a doctor. In other words, they could take a musician and say, well, you have other skills we really like, and turn you into a doctor. And the program is amazingly successul because there again, that you're getting the kind of person that can put in that kind of effort and dedication, plus has a softer side to them. And it's turning out to be a terrific kind of idea.
Sure. How many musicians, great musicians out there have done something else too? I'm thinking of the head of Curtis, Roberto Diaz. I mean, he studied engineering in Santiago. There's all kinds of I wrote a book on Polish musicians called From Paderewski to Penderecki, and some of the greatest musicians in that book also studied law.
Oh.
Who would have thought? But
right. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of something that's been on my mind for a while is to gather up all the people that you know, because you see them, like a lot of people in news, for example. Chuck Todd had a full ride in college as a French horn player.
Huh.
And now you see him on television every day talking politics. And there's really a long list of people that have a direct connection to music, and we don't know that because it's in the background. I think it should be more in the foreground, that there is a structure to studying. When you send a 5th grader off to start playing trombone or something, they're now, it's a different approach to learning, and it's going to follow them their whole life if it's done properly. So when you said you didn't have much to offer to students, you're actually offering exactly what you should, is that structure and that even routine. You know, even
well, I like to think I'm not useless, yeah.
I'm curious. So when you take this sort of like hardline approach and you're honest with students, how much, like percentage-wise, like how often do they take your advice? How often do they say, like, this isn't for me? Like, maybe I should pursue
Well, I'm not always waiting for an answer, so I don't know.
Good one.
We'll see.
Please do not answer this question.
We'll see what it's like the next time I see him. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, not being useless, Gene said that you were very useful back in the day when you two guys were hanging out. When things would get tough in a social situation, he could depend on you to protect him.
Is that right? I don't remember that at all.
There was something, Polish bear or something. What was that? Oh, I can't remember, but I just remember once we went over, we were celebrating or something, and we went out of Tanglewood into New York State. And we saw a club. It was you and me and Kaz.
Oh, yeah. I remember this now.
And so we went in. It was a pretty nice club, and not great, but anyway. And we had a couple of drinks, and then the comedian came on, and the comedian was actually he told nothing but Polish jokes, and I could see your temperature rising.
Yeah.
Both Kaz and I were getting a little bit uncomfortable.
You're getting redder and redder as we're watching.
So we decided that it was time that you might turn into a bear. So we had to get you out of the club.
Yeah.
We did, but we had to work a little bit at it, and
that's interesting. I've always been maybe more affected than I should have been by Polish jokes. And matter of fact, I never forget anyone who's ever told one. And one time in Indiana, I lived with Bill Bell after his wife died.
Oh, yeah.
And one time a Russian orchestra came in, and he invited the trombones and tuba over to the house. And a friend of mine was studying Russian in school, so he came in to interpret. And remember, I was speaking to one of the trombone players. He spoke some English, and between my little bit of Polish, we could speak some. And he started to insult me. It was just this Russian kind of superiority. Everything Polish is shit.
For real.
And so I took him outside. I said, "I'm going to beat the shit out of you." And anyway, some people came in to diffuse the situation, but it turns out afterwards, the Russian interpreter told me, he says, he was the plant for the trombones and tuba. He was a commie. He was supposed to keep track of everybody. So if you'd done anything with him, you'd have been in big trouble. Anyway. Yeah.
Well, that's we all developed so much respect for you that it was wonderful, and felt like that was such a good friendship that we developed. At least that I felt that it lasted all this time, even though, hey, hi, I haven't seen you for 40 years.
Yeah.
But still, I have that warm, wonderful, comfortable feeling with you, and it's just wonderful.
That's for sure with me too, Gene. I'm not really good with all this this 21st century electronic stuff. I see you on Facebook doing things, but I don't respond to almost anybody on Facebook, and most of the time I don't pay attention to it. It drives me nuts.
I understand.
Yeah.
And we don't have to do that anymore.
It's not because I don't think about you, Gene. It's just because I hate the medium. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Well, we have other interests right now. I think it's a wonderful, excuse me, guys. I think it's a wonderful age where we're at right now, because basically we can become completely free. I feel that.
Why not?
And why not? Yeah. And that's wonderful. And I think we were pretty close to that in Tanglewood anyway. What do we know? So that's.
So did you guys meet all the greats at Tanglewood? Because that was the for Bernstein and and all his colleagues. I mean,
Yeah, yeah. You know what I remember most
Lenny
about,
used to come, right?
remember what I remember most about Bernstein, him sitting in the row, three or four seats, 3 or 4 rows in front of me, kissing Copland right on the lips. I thought, what is this?
And also,
what is this?
someone else, shippers or somebody, and they were under a blanket giggling in the front row of the concert hall.
Oh, it's funny.
Yeah, and he would go swimming every day, right?
I don't remember
Yeah.
swimming, honestly.
Yeah, he would go down and sit on with the boys.
Well, just so we don't get too deep into this,
Yeah.
we'll go back to the Philadelphia Brass Ensemble. You're doing royalties, but you remember the recording the Catch the Brass Ring?
Sure, of course. Matter of fact, the assistant conductor of the orchestra resurrected some of those charts, and we would play them every once in a while in a kids' concert.
Oh, nice.
Black magic, the tuba solo, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know that my recollection was, I think that came out, must have been mid '60s. My recollection, and correct me if I'm wrong, the recording came out on CBS or something, and Ormandy saw it the day it came out and insisted it be withdrawn.
That's correct.
Taken off the market immediately. That would have been a major, that would have changed brass right then. It wouldn't have, lucky for us, in 1970, we were still able to be on the ground floor of brass. But that catch.
Yeah, he had said, well, this is that was another era where the conductor was all powerful,
Mm-hmm.
At the end of end of Ormandy's career, that had all begun to dissipate considerably. But there was a period of time when you had to do what he said. I remember when I got hired, a man who came in with me at the same time was a violist, and after about a few months, he started to grow a beard. And Ormandy says, you can't grow a beard, I'll fire you. Well, that's when his power started to wane, and he couldn't do anything about that. But that's the sort of thing. If he had a whim, it would have been just like Reiner. I don't like that. That's tough.
Well, that was all the brass players had their catchy names, like Torchinsky became Torchy Jones and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, that was the big objection that Ormandy had, the name.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Because it was simply a fresh look at standard repertoire that you might hear in Tchaikovsky and so forth.
Yeah, for sure.
And it was just like swung out a little bit. And it was, I mean, really not that revolutionary, but it was revolutionary that serious classical musicians would have done that. And that,
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And the message never got out.
Yeah. Right.
Very small, a few people had that record and they'd kind of pass it around. And, now in the day of the internet, there would have been no way to suppress that.
Yeah, I don't even have the record. I don't know what happened to it.
Yeah.
It's, Torchy's 3 daughters are still around. Two still live in Philadelphia, and the other one's in Florida. So we talk about that every once in a while.
Yeah, that's fun. Well, it's a great bunch. So one last question that I have for you is, was it just luck that you, of all orchestras that you would audition for and play in major orchestra, it was Philadelphia where you grew up?
It's funny you should say that. I still have a couple of friends that I grew up in my neighborhood with. Well, actually just one. And because his brother died. And he says to me, you always wanted to play with Philadelphia. I said to him, I don't remember that at all. I'd have taken a job with anybody. I don't remember that at all. And when after I went to school, I went in the United States Military Academy Band at West Point. And I got out of that, and I jobbed around Boston for a while. And then I played in the Buffalo Philharmonic for a short period of time. And that's when, well, that's a long story. We're not going to talk about that. And then I got Youngstown University for a year. And during that year, I had to decide whether I could live with being a college teacher for the rest of my career. And fortunately, that question didn't have to get answered just yet because Philly happened. I auditioned for that, and got that. But yeah, so. But listen, if I'd been playing in Jacksonville or Nashville or somewhere else, I mean, it would have been a job. And those orchestras are pretty good now. They weren't worth a damn in the 70s.
There's a now, is this an urban legend or is this true? But the thing that set you apart in the Philadelphia Orchestra audition was not only playing wonderful, normal audition kinds of things, but you brought in a Bach cello suite. Well,
that's true. That's true. I brought in a Bourrée.
Gene, you weren't lying to me. I see. I was thought.
That's true.
Chuck's finally telling the truth.
It's true. I did do that. I did do that, and Normandy liked it. But I think more than anything, he liked what I did with the Mahler 1 solo, and also the fact that if he put something on the stand, I didn't have to look at the music. I knew it from memory. And he was impressed with that, you know. And actually, in that time, Ormandy stood right beside me. It's not like anything happens today. And the assistant and I had to audition twice. The first time was just for Ormandy on the stage with the personnel manager. And then he went to Europe because he wanted to hear some players over there. And you might not know this, but the tuba player in the Concertgebouw Orchestra had gone to Curtis at the time.
Oh, sure. Blakesley,
yeah. And then he also wanted to hear a couple of guys. Actually, Milt Culbertson convinced him to hear him in Paris. Anyway, then he sent back a word later that I should come in and audition for the brass guys. So I went back to Philly to play for Dotson, Gil Johnson, Mason Jones, and the assistant conductor. But I should tell you, when I was at Youngstown, I never missed a day practicing. I decided to take a day off on a Sunday. I get a call Sunday night saying, "You have to come to Philly tomorrow to play an audition." Are you shitting me? And guess what happened? A snowstorm hit.
Oh.
I started to drive, got halfway across Pennsylvania, and at Breezewood, the turnpike was closed.
Oh, wow.
We got one of the last rooms in Pennsylvania, and the window wouldn't close entirely, and snow was coming in. I slept at, I don't know, maybe 50 some degrees, and got to Philly, just beat the dickens the next day. But and so I played that evening, but it all worked out.
Wow, amazing.
That's great. That was great.
You had to really want it, right?
Well, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So Jarrett's our young, unbelievable great, one of these, another one of the unbelievable great tuba players. Jarrett, so from this conversation, I would think there's a zillion things in here that are really useful for someone on their way up.
Absolutely. Don't trust the Russians.
Never. I don't know what Trump is doing there.
All right, see you guys later.
Well, we have a quick Russian story. When the Canadian Brass went to Russia, we'd been in China in the spring. So that fall we went to Russia, and they must have thought there's something up. The Canadian government's sending these guys out for something. So they put interpreters on us. We had two so-called interpreters.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Well, the first day they only spoke French. So they realized they had to get new interpreters. So the next day, and these ones, he was wearing an Olympic shirt, and we were sitting talking to him. We said, "Well, tell us about yourself. Your wife." He said, "Where'd you meet your wife?" He said, "Oh, at target practice." Interesting.
Yeah.
He bought all of our jeans and all of our what he really wanted was Playboy magazines, right?
Oh. Well, this has been great to have you as a guest, and I'm glad Gene could join because I know you guys, I've heard so much about the stories and the stuff. And I know the time we did hang out for a little bit in Philadelphia, just walking around and hanging out was great fun.
Yeah, yeah, and of course I remember well in Japan with
Never
Kaz,
disappoint.
with Kaz,
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks so much.
That's great.
My pleasure, Gene. What a nice surprise today.
Yeah, all the best it was.
You be well.
It was
You
great.
be well. You be well,
Thank
Jarrett.
you.
I'll meet you one of these days. Have I met you before, Jarrett?
Yeah, you have. I auditioned for Curtis a couple years ago.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well,
the name is really familiar to me, but damn.
I'm sure you said, "Oh, Jarrett, you're too far advanced to bother coming to Curtis."
no, that wasn't what he said. That was not what he said.
You auditioned for Curtis. You auditioned for Curtis a couple of years ago. Who got that then?
I was Andrew, I think, got it that year.
Oh, the dope. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, don't feel bad. Andrew's really good too.
yeah, he is.
Great. Thanks so much.
All right, guys. Be well. I hope to see you
Bye.
again.